Hello, everybody. Today, I would like to talk briefly about the Chinese-Dutch Nexperia experience, which is a huge source of geopolitical turmoil and made the Chinese government very, very angry because it's quite an interesting story and also quite a very radical approach from the Dutch government towards the Chinese company Nexperia. So, what or who is Nexperia? Well, Nexperia is originally a Dutch company. It was a Philips company who produces semiconductors or microchips. The chips they produce is not extremely high end. These are relatively mid end or low end chips, mostly used in the automotive sector or the household appliances sector, and a lot of them are sold actually to European clients. Now, this company has been acquired by the Chinese company Wingtech, which is a Shanghai listed company in 2018. And Wingtech is a listed company, and a lot of shareholders of Wingtech are actually other Chinese state owned companies, so the government. Now, of course, it's not surprising that China has acquired, the Chinese company Wingtech has acquired Nexperia in 2018, because, of course, China is in the semiconductor space a little bit still behind. And, of course, it was quite interesting for them to acquire a Dutch company with this skill set and the design capabilities and production capabilities of chips. So, given all this, what is actually the reason why the Dutch government took this rather radical step to control now the Chinese company? And it's rather interesting. They have used a law from 1951, which is only it's more than 70 years ago, and has never been used before. This is the very first time, which actually was designed and established in 1951 for the reason that in times of war or in times of a threat of war, that the Dutch government could take control over certain companies in the Netherlands, foreign companies in the Netherlands, in the terms or in for the purpose of national security, that certain knowledge and know-how would not leave the country. So now we come to the heart of the matter, and that is that why does actually the Dutch government has taken over Nexperia? Well, there is a lot of speculation in the press, and the most speculation or the biggest reason that has been named is the very fact that the Dutch government was afraid that certain knowledge and know-how would leak from Nexperia and would be going back to China. Now, as mentioned, this is rather remarkable because Nexperia is not producing any high-tech chips. It's more in the mid segment, basically. Now, another reason, and here I need to thank the Dutch blog Up from Fred Sengers, who explained this very well. Second reason could be that there was the fear that Wingtech would produce some of its production lines from the Netherlands back to China. Now, of course, that is very well possible. However, it's also not that easy because just wrapping up a high-tech factory and put it back to China is not that easy. It can be done, obviously, but it will take time. And also, the very fact is that Nexperia is rather profitable and very successful in Europe because it does sell from, towards European clients. So it's not very logical to move all the production back to China. And also, there is already a lot of production actually in China from Nexperia. Now, a third reason might be actually much more plausible, and this has not been talked a lot about in the press. So, actually, what happened in last year in December is that the American government put Wingtech on the so-called entity list. That is a blacklist, basically, which says that if the companies on that list, and a lot of them are obviously Chinese companies, if they want to buy certain American products or equipment or technology, the American government has to basically agree with that. So it is the same as China did last week with the rare earth metals. If you want to buy these things, the government needs to agree. And what happened with that list is that from October 1st from this year, so not too long ago, the subsidiaries of these companies also are now put on that list. And of course, Nexperia, as a subsidiary of Wingtech, has now fallen on that list. Now, of course, the timing of that is rather remarkable. Also, because basically, the very fact is that not only did the Nexperia saga happened last weekend, but of course, it is also very much true that the United States has now put two Russian oil refineries on sanctions, and these oil supplies are not going to India anymore. I mean, India could choose to buy them, but maybe not do this. So obviously, it seems that the United States want to hit India, and Europe might be want to hit China in a kind of coordinated action. And why would they do such a thing? Well, that could be because actually in 2023, it has been reported by the British think tank Royal United Services Institute that Nexperia parts were found in Russian rockets in Ukraine. Now, if this is true or not, we're not really sure. However, it was reported, but Nexperia denied these accusations. It did say that maybe these parts from Nexperia have been found in Russian rockets. However, it might have been not a direct sale, it could have been indirectly because Nexperia might not always know where the products end up. And he said, okay, we might have sold to somebody who then sold them through to Russia. So Nexperia has denied these accusations. However, it could have been right now, of course, because the conflict in Russia and Ukraine is heating up, and the US and Europe are trying to sanction Russia, that they want to hit Russia indirectly. And of course, Nexperia would be collateral damage because these chips have been found in rockets. Now, obviously, the Chinese government is rather furious about all this. I mean, after all, you are taking control of a Chinese company, which of course has never been done before by the Dutch government. And the Chinese government basically said very simply, okay, if you do this, then we will not sell any of our chips anymore towards your European clients. And that is kind of a massive oversight from the Dutch government, or either they were completely ignorant about this, either they just didn't really think about it very well, because actually a lot of the production of Nexperia is happening in China. And obviously the Dutch government didn't think about that. So this is a massive oversight, a huge one might call own goal from the Dutch government. And as a result, now the Dutch government is scrambling to go to China, or at least talk to the Chinese government, and try to solve this problem as soon as possible. So it might have been that the Dutch government was very much aware, of course, that Nexperia would come on the so-called entity list to the United States, and that might be the reason why they would like to take control over Nexperia, so then it became all of a sudden a Dutch company and not anymore a Chinese company. Hence, it could then buy, of course, still material or raw material or supplies from the US, which could be used in the production of these chips and being sold in Europe. So hence, it would make then it would ensure that production and the normal operations of the company would go on. But anyway, this is of course a massive own goal because there is no way that China would accept this. And obviously, secondly, the real question is also, was this really necessary from the Dutch government? I mean, these are not really high-tech chips. Was really this an action that really that warrants the outcome that you have right now? I really highly doubt this. Fallout is already very big. Because now, right now, especially in the automotive sector in Europe, and especially Volkswagen, is now facing the prospect that it might not have enough chips to resume production. And Volkswagen already informed their workforce there might be a halt of production because they are not able to find or to buy these chips anymore in enough quantities. And if I'm not mistaken, I think a car has between 500 to 1,000 chips, mostly from Nexperia, apparently. So this already has a massive fallout. And also it was reported today that a supply analysis of 107 leading European corporations from 7 industries showed that about 86% purchase acquired chips from Nexperia sites in China. So a lot of these chips from Nexperia are actually produced in China, and 107 European companies buying from them. So 100% of these companies were in the aerospace and defense sectors. So in that sector, they all need to buy chips from China. 95% in mechanical engineering, 86% in medical technology, and 49%, as just mentioned, in the automotive sector. Now, obviously, this does remind a bit, and this is also reported by Politico, it reminds a bit of the European 22 shortage of chips during the pandemic, obviously, where there was also a shortage of a threat of shortage of chips. And then the European Union passed the so-called CHIPS Act. And the CHIPS Act really was the idea was behind to make sure that Europe would be much less reliant, because Europe has a very dangerous reliance on other regions for advanced or mature chips, the workhorse chips, as China is producing them. And the idea would really be that with this first CHIPS Act, that basically Europe would be much less dependent on other countries for this these kind of chips. And now, given the Nexperia crisis, the European Union is now actually launching its second CHIPS Act. Now, the irony of this all is that actually the first CHIPS Act from 2022, Europe is not even close to reaching the first goal of that act, because the idea was that we would boost the market share in the global microchips value chain to 20% by 2030, and that's about double of the current share. So they're not even close to reaching that, but now they want to launch a second one because of the whole Nexperia experience. In any case, this saga will continue. China is pretty upset about this. As mentioned, the Dutch government is scrambling now to talk with China to find a solution, but it does seem that this is a massive own goal from the Dutch government and maybe Europe as a whole. On top, of course, all the problems that Europe already has. The British government is not doing very well, and the UK might be heading for bankruptcy. Macron is a very unpopular president. I think the sixth prime minister, I think, in his term, also might be having for bankruptcy. Germany is not doing very well, as we know, having also a lot of massive energy problems. Energy is way too expensive because, of course, it doesn't buy Russian gas and oil anymore. And, of course, every day in Europe, they're focusing a lot on the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, which they are completely fixated on and try everything and pumping billions of euros to Ukraine to keep them alive, basically. And then on top of that, of course, now they have the whole China problem. So not only China did say last week, okay, we're going to limit or at least control the exports of our metals. Now, of course, the experience from Nexperia is actually adding fuel to the fire, which will give much more trouble to Europe in the future also. The saga will continue. We'll see what happens, and it would be interesting to see how this one gets solved. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Hope to see you next time, and enjoy the rest of the day.